Salibonani bantu bakithi. Good day, everyone. Did you know that the British government, through the Home Office, has a policy, a standing policy right now as we speak, that says the people of Ndebele-land in Zimbabwe are abusive or a risk to the people of Mashonaland in Zimbabwe? What do I mean? This is a policy that is recorded in a document that is called the Country Policy and Information Note Zimbabwe Opposition to Government. It's a document that was put together and published by the Home Office through the Independent Advisory Group on Country Information back in 2021. In this policy document, the British government makes several assertions based on what they call facts that they compiled about Zimbabwe and the people of Zimbabwe, information that would then be used as facts to consider immigration cases by Zimbabweans, particularly immigration cases related to human rights abuses, where people are fleeing or have fled Zimbabwe and they are seeking asylum or refugee status under the Geneva Convention in the United Kingdom. The information on this document is information that was compiled by the Home Office through the Independent Advisory Group and Country Information, through cases that were conducted in the United Kingdom for Zimbabweans that were migrating in the year 2013. And there was a state witness that was used at the time by the name of Dewa Mavinga, who was with Human Rights Watch. Mr. Mavinga told or submitted witness statements saying that when a person is fleeing Zimbabwe, or when a person is facing persecution or human rights violations in Zimbabwe and considers to flee Zimbabwe, they would not otherwise have considered relocating internally within Zimbabwe to run away from the violations of their local area. If they were Shona and they tried to flee to Ndebele-land, or Bulawayo specifically, as an example, Mr. Mavinga indicated that such people, if they were from Mashonaland, they would more than likely face further abuse in the form of further discrimination from the people of Ndebele-land in general. And Mr. Mavinga went on further to say that it is actually the opposite when it comes to people of Ndebele-land facing abuse within their region in Ndebele-land, because in his view, what he was saying is that the people of Ndebele-land would have had an option to flee to Mashonaland and hide there from whatever persecutions they would have been facing in Zimbabwe, as opposed to considering to flee to the United Kingdom. So you can imagine when somebody puts out these facts, or when the immigration officials in the United Kingdom have to use these falsified facts to determine serious immigration cases for Zimbabweans, particularly coming from Ndebele-land at the time, and even up to today, they would be saying that when they are looking at a case of somebody who is claiming to be fleeing from, let's say, Bulawayo or from Ngai or from anywhere within the Ndebele-land region, the immigration officials in the United Kingdom would be saying that person could have easily, ran away and sought refuge in Harare. Whereas a person in Chipinge or in Harare or in Murewa couldn't have run away and sought a refuge or hiding in Bulawayo or in Nkai. Because in the eyes of this document and policy, it's possible from someone from Ndebele-land to still remain in Zimbabwe, no matter how difficult the situation could have been by the Zimbabwean government. They could have still stayed in Zimbabwe and just, fled to Mashonaland. Yet a person from Mashonaland facing the same abuse by the government or the state agents could have not fled to any other part of Zimbabwe, particularly in Ndebele-land, because they would have faced persecution. So to me, this is a very, very, very bad policy to be adopted by the British government. And for them to have this policy standing from 2021 until today, when attempts were even made prior to them publishing it officially as a policy to be used for immigration purposes, they were cautioned against some of these views and some of these false statements by a Zimbabwean whose contribution through a review of the document per their request, a Zimbabwean who was working for an organization called Development Governance Institute. And this Zimbabwean's name was Kudzai Chatiza. He was called upon and used by the very same department, the Independent Advisory Group on Country Information, in October of 2021. After the release of the document, they called on Mr. Chatiza with the Development Governance Institute to give them a review or to do a review of the document and tell them whether or not the information was accurate in the document. And Mr. Chatiza told them that that information was, in fact, false. And he cautioned them on the ethnic risk that ethnic bias or misinformation based on ethnicity, that information was presenting. But then again, the Home Office decided that regardless of the reviews that were being provided by Mr. Chatiza, disputing or condemning the document as it was, in particular regarding this very fact that people of Ndebele-land region in general, beyond the government itself, are actually abusive to the people of Mashonaland. The Home Office decided that that does not matter. They want to continue using the document as is, and as far as they are concerned, the British immigration officials should use the document as such, and when they consider immigration cases of people fleeing Zimbabwe for human rights violations to seek asylum or refugee status in the United Kingdom, they should look at them in accordance with the recommendations of the document, whereby they should consider that it is possible that they can decline a person from Ndebele-land being allowed to remain in the United Kingdom if they are claiming that they ran away from Zimbabwe due to fear of persecution, because otherwise they could have run away and gone to Mashonaland. Whereas in the same light, a person from Mashonaland must be considered as a person facing a higher risk and a person who would have had very limited, if any at all, options to remain within Zimbabwe, because they would have had no options to flee to any other part of Zimbabwe, such as, in particular, Ndebele-land. Please allow me to read a section of this document. I'm going to put a link of it at the bottom of the podcast. You can check for a link of it there, and you can read it for yourself. And I would hope that for those that it touches, because this is not a document that is irrelevant to us as Zimbabweans in general. This is a document that divides us, along ethnic lines. It's a document that is very inflammatory. It's a document that I believe is very dangerous by the government of the United Kingdom, a document that it continues to use even today, whether there are cases that they are looking at with reference to human rights abuses and asylum or refugee status. This document, as a document that they are still using, is a document that is very, very wrong, and a document that further violates the rights of Zimbabweans in terms of misrepresenting them or misrepresenting us as a community living in harmony outside of the relations that the people have with the government of Zimbabwe, whether those relations are such that the government is abusive or otherwise to its own people. We are talking here about the general community, where they are saying if a person from Mashonaland just goes and lives in Bulawayo, just to go and live in Bulawayo, just because they are Shona or from the Shona ethnic group, they are going to be discriminated upon, they are going to be abused, and yet they are claiming that a person from Ndebele-land, just because they are Ndebele, and if they decided to go to Mashonaland, and in Harare in particular, that that person faces a very comfortable life of no discrimination and being treated very wonderfully. So to me, I think these statements are very, very, misleading. They are very misinformed. I'm going to read excerpts from this document or extract from the document. Section 2, it deals primarily with internal relocation, what the immigration officials would be looking at as considerations per this document. It says, although the person's fear is of persecution, serious harm at the hands of the state, they may be able to relocate to mitigate that risk, provided that the relocation would not be unreasonable. So let's see what they mean when they say, provided the situation would not be unreasonable. What are they talking about when they talk about a situation being not unreasonable? The issue of what is a person's home for the purposes of internal relocation is to be decided as a matter of fact and is not necessarily to be determined by reference to the place a person from Zimbabwe regards as his or her rural homeland. As a general matter, it is unlikely that a person with a well-founded fear of persecution in a major urban center such as Harare will have a viable internal relocation alternative to a rural area in the eastern provinces. Relocation to Ndebele-land, including Bulawayo, may be negated by discrimination where the returnee is Shona. Can you believe this? Unbelievable. And it continues here to say internal relocation from a rural area to Harare, or subject to what we have just said, Bulawayo, is, in general, more realistic, but the socio-economic circumstances in which persons are reasonably likely to find themselves will need to be considered in order to determine whether it would be unreasonable or unduly harsh to expect them to relocate. Section 2.6.3. In general, it is unlikely that a person with a well-founded fear of persecution in a major urban center, such as Harare or Bulawayo, will reasonably be able to relocate to a rural area in the eastern provinces. I don't know what's going on with these eastern provinces that they seem to be thinking, in such light of. And then it continues. In general, internal relocation from a rural area in Harare or Bulawayo is reasonable in the case of the Shona ethnic group. Relocation to Matabeleland, including Bulawayo, may not be reasonable, as they may face discrimination. Wow. People, this is what the British government is going on when they are making immigration decisions about Zimbabweans from Matabeleland and from Mashonaland. Tell me if you don't think that there is probably tens or hundreds of people, if not more, that are coming from Matabeleland who would have had their cases probably declined and probably still in limbo today or to date, based on decisions that were made on facts or related to facts that are so misconnected from the truth on the ground, facts that could have easily been verified by the British Home Office with the embassy of the British government in Zimbabwe, in Harare. All they needed to do to ascertain whether these community-related facts are true or not is for them to actually go to Bulawayo or observe, since they are available and are present locally, to actually see how the people of Bulawayo intermingle with, in fact, I shouldn't even say the people of Bulawayo, say how the Ndebele ethnic group of people interrelate with the Shona ethnic group of people in general, because they are generalizing here. They are saying, in general, a person from Mashonaland fleeing to try and go and stay in Bulawayo, in general, will face discrimination or abuse in general from the general population of the people of Matabeleland. This, to me, is a lie by the British government. It is misinformation on a very, very important public policy document that they are going with, which should be put aside, which should be pulled from use. Now, I was part of a group of people that have written to the British Home Office before. We wrote a letter to them to protest the existence of this document as to why it is being used and the fact that it should not be used. And indeed, we got a response from the Independent Advisory Group on Country Information. We wrote a letter to them in May of 2025, and in June of 2025, they wrote back to us indicating that they do acknowledge the facts that we have raised or the points that we have raised, and they also do acknowledge that they had received similar protests or similar issues or queries related to the same document and information on the policy that is in question. I want to say to Mr. Chatiza, and I've communicated with him. He has also responded, confirming that his position was indeed that the British government faulted and continues to fault to date by keeping this document active as a policy to date, where an immigration official will look at a person from Zimbabwe fleeing persecution, fleeing human rights violations, and coming to the United Kingdom, taking advantage of international Geneva protection laws to seek refugee status or asylum. And the British government would be looking at whether that person is Ndebele-on-Shona and deciding whether or not they should give them asylum, not on the basis of their persecution in Zimbabwe, but more so also on the basis of whether they are Ndebele-on-Shona and whether they could have otherwise reasonably be denied status in the United Kingdom or protection in the United Kingdom on the basis of ethnicity and the risk that they think that person may face or may not face in Zimbabwe based on simply their ethnicity, not political affiliation or any other issues that may have caused them to flee Zimbabwe. So anyway, that being said, my name is Thabo Siziba. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining us all the time. Please, if you haven't yet subscribed, subscribe. I'm sure you'd love many of the conversations that are coming down the line. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. And please do comment as well. I'd love to hear your opinions. And for this particular subject of today, if you can take action, if you are close to the British government in one form or another, you know, an MP or a councillor or somebody that you can reach out to bring this to their attention. It's something that is being used today to divide our people, to cause hate within our people, to cause discrimination within the community of Zimbabwe. And it shouldn't be allowed. And I am quite sure that there is so many people in the United Kingdom that are probably sitting on documents or decisions that are in limbo for years, some probably more than a decade. And I know examples, or I know people that have been in the United Kingdom for more than a decade without decisions on their immigration process being finalized, still not knowing why and how. But again, when we look at this, we can only think that this probably contributes to some of those cases that may be in limbo in the United Kingdom for certain members of our Zimbabwean community. Thank you, guys, and have a great time.